Okay, what's today, Dayvid?
Today's Saturday, March 4th. It's 1 p.m. We're at the corner of 6th and Bonneville in the fabulous Beverly Theater.
We're here
So
with
beautiful.
Veeda Bybee. We're here with Kim Foster, and we're here with this sexy audience. I'd take y'all anywhere.
Right.
All right, let's do questions, Dayvid.
Crazy applause is very sexy. I love that.
All right.
All right. Well, we're going to be talking about writing from Vegas, writing about Las Vegas. And here is the first question. How long do you need to be in Las Vegas to write about Las Vegas?
Ooh, that's like, okay. I think the longer you live here, the harder it is to write about it.
Oh. Why is that?
I was thinking a lot about people who are not here all the time and are able to have a sort of eye on observing the city and making comparisons to where they live. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes that creates sort of an interesting thing. Like, I think about when I wrote this book, I was telling Sonia that I kind of freaked out when we had to talk about Las Vegas and writing about Las Vegas, because I don't think my book is about Las Vegas.
Oh.
And so I feel like my book could sort of be set anywhere, and that it's not really about Vegas at all. And so I because I just live here, and I just get in my car every day and park my car and take my kids to school and do all the things. And so I don't even know if it's really a Vegas book or not.
But some of the sections are definitely placed in Vegas.
It's set in Vegas for sure. But the question is whether it's really a book about Vegas or whether it's just a book about humans, and those humans happen to live in Vegas.
Oh. Veeda, what do you think about that?
It's interesting. I've lived here twice, so altogether it's been almost 9 years. So I feel like I'm almost to the point where I feel like I'm from Las Vegas. Like, my family is growing up here. But there is this thing with Vegas when it comes to writing that people have a different perception of it. It's just what draws everyone here, but not necessarily like the everyday 2 million people who live in the city. And so I think, like, I like how you mentioned, Kim, the longer you lived here, the harder it is, because I think we get past like, there's the entertainment here, but there's also like normal families that contribute to, like, there's dentists, and like people who work at the grocery store and people who take their kids to school. And like, I want to make sure I get that right as well.
Yeah.
So that's always a really good point to bring up too.
Yeah, and I think, like, for instance, I wrote about the Smiths on Sahara in Maryland, which my hairstylist refers to as murder Smiths. And but I actually love that Smiths. But the reason I wrote about that, so I wrote about this thing in Vegas, but the truth is it's just a lightning rod for talking about the questions that I wanted to ask, which is, like, who deserves to live here and who can live here, and where do people buy their food, and what does it mean that some people don't want to buy their food there because, and why don't people want to buy their food there, and what does it mean? So for me, it was just a lightning rod, but that store could be in Detroit, it could be in LA, it could be in a little tiny town in Minnesota. It's just a way to talk about the sort of the human condition.
Which I think is really important to bring up, that, people who live in Las Vegas, we are all humans. We're all the same as everyone else,
Are we?
That's the real question. I mean, okay, Dayvid, what do you think? How long do you got to live out here before you can write about it?
More than a weekend, less than your whole life.
Yeah.
So I'm barely in that little swath there. What do you think, Vogue?
My baseline was 10 years, which I'm about to hit. When I think about it, though, I think for those of us who are transplants, I think it's once you stop saying, I'm going to go home for the weekend. Like, once you stop going back to where you used to live and calling that place home is when you've gotten closer to the place where you can say, Vegas is what you claim, and you can claim it with pride. So, like, there were years where I was like, nope, California native, I don't believe in winter. Like, it came out of my mouth often. And I'm getting now to the point where I'm like, sear me, baby. Like, go ahead and both sides.
I'm gonna amend my answer. I think you need to be here long enough that things that you fell in love with aren't here anymore.
Like what?
Oh, how'd that go?
My husband's face just now. My husband was like, yes.
Because that's a very, so I often say this because it's easier to follow my own cliches and come up with original thoughts all the time. But welcome to Las Vegas. Don't get used to the things you fell in love with. Or alternate, enjoy the things that are here while they're here because they're not going to be here forever. And that's true about a lot of things, but not everything. But I think that that one tilling of the soil, that one long season of, wow, that nightclub I love, that coffee shop I love, that building that I love, that casino maybe, that junior high that my kid went to is no longer there anymore. And now something new is in its place or something isn't in its place. That to me is long enough to be a person who claims that they could write about Las Vegas.
But do you feel like things happen, things go away quicker here? Do you think things are more transient? Not just people, but I mean things.
Yeah, I mean, things do turn over pretty quickly. One of my favorite places in all of Las Vegas was here for 3 months.
Damn.
What
place was that?
It was a nightclub called, for you old timers, it was a nightclub in the Venetian called Venus. Very hip places where Richard Cheese and his band first got their like big break, big start. The Fontini Sisters, I think is the name of if Laura Herbert was here, she'd correct me immediately. But there was a burlesque troupe that played in the side room. It was a little tiki room. It had the unfortunate luck to open on 9/11/2001. It was founded by a guy who was in a band that had that song 88 Lines About 44 Women. Do you remember that tune from, okay, it's an old school
just veered so
punk rock
far.
museum. It's all over there. But it lasted 3 months. But it was the 3 months that we were there almost every night, which was very unusual that we would even go to the Strip, let alone go there all the time. Right. And it disappeared. So that was a 3-month example. There are things that have, the Enigma Coffee House. I mean, I could go down my own personal list. But I'm sure how long have you been back here, Veeda? That has anything disappeared from the first time that you were here?
Actually, yes. As you were talking, I used to love to go to Bocce Burger. And it's and we moved back, and I think it might have been around for a month, and it just kind of tanked and went from there. So that's a really good point. I'm going to think about that.
Because that is a Vegas
I'm from
thing.
Vegas now.
May I interject?
You could write about Vegas now. Yeah.
I want to interject. So when we talk about the disappearance of things, do y'all think that contributes to why it's so hard to write about Las Vegas?
Ooh.
What do you think?
Well, I'm a children's book writer, and I feel like there's a certain narrative that Las Vegas brings to people's minds, and it very seldom is for children, you know? So I think like because there is such a lack of books about kids in Las Vegas, you know, there's no precedent to set, so it's just harder. And I wish that wasn't so. So, you know, it makes it difficult to be like, oh, this is set in Las Vegas, and other people are, you know, I've had responses from editors or my agent at times where they've been like, oh, I don't know if everyone can relate to that because it's, you know, no one lives in Las Vegas, or they think Las Vegas is certain. I know, so
no one lives here.
Yeah. Like, no, there's so many kids who actually live here. We have like, you know, one of the biggest school systems in the nation, and I think it's really, you know, there's something here, and I hope to be part of that, you know, so.
Wait, what was the question again?
Why is it so hard to write about Las Vegas?
Look, I think it's because a lot of other people have their ideas about Vegas, and they're very, very important to them and connected to them. And I'll tell you, when we first moved here, we were basically living at the Cosmopolitan because we were going back and forth, and my husband was producing a show. And my only understanding of Vegas was the Strip. And I hated it. I went to Circus, and I remember taking the kids there and doing the arcade, and I texted my husband and I said, this place sucks so hard. We have to get out of here. And he was like, oh, no. And then he did this whole thing where he tried to get me to fall in love with Vegas by taking me to all these amazing places and like taking me out to the rocks and the mountains and doing all this stuff. And then I went and the rocks, and you know, and so and then we went and like we took the kids to Kim Bevington's art classes, and she lives on 6th Street. And so just going into her house, which is like this mid-century modern, like beautiful, like gorgeous, you know, house.
That street's amazing.
That street is amazing. saying. You live on there.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I got to see this other side. So I think what happens is that people come to Vegas and they have this itsy bitsy little tiny idea of what it is, and then they have a hard time letting that go. And so when you write about it, maybe they don't see what you write because they're too busy seeing their own impression of it. That's my feeling.
When you present things to the outside world, what sort of challenges are there in dealing with editors and publishers presenting Vegas work?
So my publishers were really clear that they wanted me to write a book that was a national book and that wouldn't be seen as a particularly Vegas book. And
Ouch.
so, well, that was part of, they wanted everyone to read it, not just people who were interested in Vegas or not. So they were very specific about that. And anytime that I became too granular about Vegas, they were on top of that with edits.
Do you think that would be the same for an author from New York or Los Angeles or Chicago or other big cities, that they would, a publisher or editor would say, don't make it so Chicago, don't make it so New York?
I think so, because I think I know my publishers, St. Martin's, did like a Detroit book that didn't really, I mean, might have done really well in Detroit, but didn't like get a lot of national acclaim. And so I think that, you know, would you read the Detroit book? Well, maybe if you were interested in Detroit, or you had family who lived in Detroit, or you came from Detroit, or you visited Detroit a lot. But if you didn't have a connection, you might not be really interested. So they were like, Vegas is great. We love that. It's really sexy. But I'm not writing a sexy book. So it really doesn't matter. I mean, my book is not sexy. So, and I'm not writing a sexy book. So it wasn't about casinos. It wasn't about gambling addiction. It wasn't about, you know, all these things and these trappings that maybe they thought it could have been about.
But, you know, so many people are so interested in Las Vegas. It would seem like that's both a natural entry, but also it sounds like it might be a barrier. Veeda, do you think that there's biases against a story or stories that are granular about Las Vegas because of these preconceived notions?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I was thinking as you're talking, Kim, you know, with writing, the more specific you are about something, it's more relatable. And so I am curious why there isn't more about a specific person in Las Vegas, you know, because, you know, that's actually more universal than, you know, depending on the story. But if you can read about someone and their specific trials and things that they're going through there, I think that actually has more appeal. So yeah, that needs to happen. We need to have some stories about in Las Vegas.
I had told Sonia before this thing, because when I called her freaking out, and I called and said to her that there was this, she said, well, is the strip in the book? And I said, I had to write the strip in one place because I felt like it wouldn't have been a Las Vegas book if I didn't put the strip in.
Oh.
And so there is one part where the strip is involved in the actual book. And I felt like if I hadn't done that, people would be like, what the fuck?
When we think about, okay, how do we add Vegas into our writing? And you think about, there are poets who are poets of place, right? And that's the heart of what they write. But I know for me, I'm like, I write around Vegas, but really I'm a people, like I'm a writer about human beings and interaction. But then I think about the other writers in Vegas who are writers of place. I feel like Sin is a writer of place, Jennifer Battisti, Rodney Lee. Those are all writers who really dig into the soil of what Vegas is. But have you all ever tried to write about Vegas and just failed, like crumbled it up and was like, ooh, don't look at that?
You know, I think as we're talking, I'm realizing, so I have a short story coming out on the end of the month. It's in a anthology collection called Calling the Moon, and it's a collection of different BIPOC authors, and we're writing about a menstruation. And so my character is actually from Las Vegas, but I don't say it on the page because she and her family, they go hiking, you know? So the actual story is taking place like outside of Las Vegas, but everything that she experiences, like she's from Las Vegas. But I'm realizing I don't actually say it on the page. And I'm thinking, I need to do that more often. So thank you for bringing that up. But yeah, so that's one way I guess I've tried to do it. Like she's from Las Vegas, even though it's taking place in Yosemite, you know? But
How about you, Kim?
I found coming from the East Coast, and maybe this is just me, but I found writing about sense of place to be a very Western thing. like and I could be wrong about this, but this is just my experience. But like writing in New York and being in New York City, people might talk about the city or write about stories about the city, but nobody talked about writing a sense of place. Like I've never sat on a conference or seen a conference where people talked about writing about a sense of place. And I think it was really startling and really fun for me to like read like Claire Vaye Watkins or like even like Amanda Fortini's writing a book, and I heard her read part of her book, and just to be able to hear people writing about the place is really amazing. But I feel like it's a very West Coast kind of thing, and I could be wrong about that, but that's just my experience.
Right. When I think about film, I think about like Spike Lee, and it's like New York is always a character.
Yep.
Sex and the City. They don't even bother to tell you it's New York. You know what the city is. Like it's the boisterousness.
They don't talk about it as sense of place. They just talk about the city as its thing.
They don't give you the title, but like there are so many other little things that I feel like let you know where you're at. So like even though it's not like lauded as a genre, I feel like it's very clearly there in like the way of life.
It is, but maybe it's that. Maybe it's about the genre thing because it just felt very new to me when I came out here. Like I just really hadn't seen that as a writer, and I was really interested in it but I hadn't really seen it that way, talked about that way.
Well, maybe it's because we're newer, but I mean, I can think of scores of books that are set in New York or New England or Florida or the Midwest that do pontificate to a certain degree about that place, that will say something that's just really poignant about life in Manhattan or life in upstate New York or somewhere in New England, and you get that sense of where you are as the story sort of develops or unfolds. And I like when Las Vegas is written about in ways where those little kind of, for lack of a better word, bon mots come out, like these just really poignant, like getchas. And you mentioned Claire Vaye Watkins, and one of my favorite recent, like Las Vegas is genre of just one sentence.
Yeah.
I'm gonna just read the Claire Vaye Watkins, and this is from her last book, I Love You, But I've Chosen Darkness.
It's a great book.
Which is a great book. And then there's this one line in there about Las Vegas. It says, "You have to be careful in Las Vegas. The place will be whatever you need it to be." Right? Snap, snap, Claire Vaye Watkins.
Yeah.
So is it hard to kind of synthesize or boil down things about Las Vegas as a writer in Las Vegas?
So I actually wrote a poem a few years ago, and I just put it on the internet, just like on my Twitter somewhere. It's buried there. But I had a friend who passed, and I just put a picture because I was thinking about her, and I was thinking about creosote. Am I saying that right? You know, it's like when it rains, that amazing smell that really only happens. Like it only happens like here in Las Vegas, and it's like this beautiful, like it was just really symbolic of, you know, this like grief I was going through, but yet there was this like this refreshing of hope too. So I think Las Vegas can be extreme that way, and so I think about that where you know, like we have this desert, but we also there are things that are beautiful about it, and you know, like look, we're at this weekend right now for this grand opening of this great theater, and so bringing to light more of that I think is needed, you know, like you know, we have this art, the art here, and so anyways, I was thinking about things like that. So
now I feel bad.
Why?
Because I have fighting questions for you guys. Kim Foster, your Twitter handle. Well, let me reverse. Thank you for sharing that story about your friend.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, really beautiful, and for whatever reason, this hand gesture works for me, and I got it. So thank you for sharing that. Fighting words. Kim, your Twitter handle is still Kim Foster NYC.
Oof,
It's been that way for a cool minute.
Burn.
Veeda, your bio says lives in Nevada.
Another burn. I know.
So we claim y'all. We love y'all. What? Why?
Kim, you can go first.
Explain.
Okay, I'll go first. All right. Okay, so you are not the only person who has thought about this, because I think about this all the time. And I just so you know, I'm thinking, oh my God, she's so with that
Lies. Here come the lies.
You're thinking, but I just, you know, it takes about 7 seconds to change it.
I know, but okay. So I I actually changed my website to be kiminthewest.com.
Oh, the West.
The
So
West.
we're getting
Kim in the
closer.
Do you live
Not
in
as
the
good as
West?
Veeda yet. She at least narrowed it down to a
Nevada.
state.
You moving?
Yeah, what? No.
somebody else
You
will
know,
take
this
those
is a
crazy
really
chickens.
great point. Like, I have to, you know something?
Introspection, here we come.
No. You're right. I have been really reticent about changing my identity from being a New Yorker to being a Las Vegan. And you're right. I do have some. I mean, my number is a 917 number, and I'm really loath to give that up as well.
You can keep your phone number. I just in the writer world.
Help me, go.
Well, I think it's interesting that we both have, it's funny because it's not like if you don't do a hard search, you can't see that I live in Las Vegas. But sometimes as a writer,
You gotta look.
okay, well, and maybe that's intentional. Sometimes as a writer, you get people who are a little bit intense. I just wanted to value some sort of privacy in a way because I feel like Las Vegas is a big city, but it's not. So, and maybe that's just like a false illusion of like maybe I
Oh,
should
everyone
still
knows your
believe you.
stuff here. Yeah, there's no secrets.
I
don't
just
think.
I don't know. Maybe I just wanted to maintain some sort of privacy of sorts, but I can see how that also disconnects me from where I am.
Well, my follow-up to that is, as a YA author, if you kind of brand yourself as a Las Vegas writer, like I mentioned before, do you think there would be these instant biases or prejudices against you, or is that not a big deal anymore? People are from everywhere.
Prejudice against me being from Las Vegas or as a YA writer?
As a YA writer.
Like you're writing
Oh.
children's books, and it's like Veeda Bybee from Las Vegas giving you children's books.
Yeah.
That.
Well, because I've lived here for so long, and maybe I'm not from here, Dayvid, but I'm around a lot of teens, and there are just so many. So I feel like maybe they will expect well, so and the manuscript I have worked on, which I haven't sold yet, they the teens do go. There's a scene where they do go to the Strip. But it's so rare these days. Like my husband grew up here, and he said, he grew up in Spring Valley, and they would go to the Strip all the time. Just like they go to Caesars like nothing. It was just like so close. But now, at least the part town I live, it's just a little further away, and it's harder to get to. So so I was trying to write for this perspective of kids going there now, where I think if someone outside looking in, they think they go there all the time, which in my world they do not. But I don't know. I would like the opportunity to show that there are children here, there are families. This is another suburb or another city, just like New York too, and people live here.
I would just like to add that I will be changing my handle tomorrow.
I will be deleting my Twitter account in solidarity.
I just found it really interesting because I know you won your awards writing about Vegas while you were living here too.
You're right. So you're right. I can't really eat from two plates. So you're right. I have to, and I feel like I
can
have.
amend it.
The interesting thing is, I feel like I have. I feel like a Las Vegan. I feel like a Nevadan. I feel connected and committed to the people here, and I love it here. And I don't want to move, and I never want to go back to friggin' New York. And so, I mean, this place is pretty
She's ours,
amazing.
everyone. We got her.
So I want to go along with that too. It took me a year and a half when I first moved here to stop hating it. It was just so hard. I think making it past your first summer,
Yes.
like, okay, I can do this hard thing. But I too feel very loyal to Las Vegas. And when people come here, they're just like, they talk trash about it. Like, you don't even understand how great this place is. Or when people move away, I'm like, traitor, I think it's a wonderful, wonderful place. And so I also feel very protective.
Yeah, we do. Stop it.
Oh, no. Well, then you're going to love this next question.
Oh, go.
So just kind of on the theme about writing about Las Vegas or writing from Las Vegas and getting Las Vegas right. Our friend Amanda Fortini recently
Amanda!
gave a talk about her forthcoming book of I'm going to call it
was
essays,
great.
but I don't know, stories, essays. And she made a comment that typically there's two categories, and I'm paraphrasing you, Amanda, and you can just jump up here, grab this mic, and correct me. Right, yeah.
That's fine.
Ladies and gentlemen, Amanda Fortini instead of me. Much better. But she said basically, there's generally two categories of people who write about Las Vegas. There's the parachuters who come in and almost invariably get something wrong or have their own narrative that they want to press. And then there's the people who are from here who are probably way too protective and don't want to do some of the truths or myth busting for whatever reasons. So as a person who's writing about Las Vegas, which one do you think you're closer to, or is there a third category?
Was that
okay, Amanda? Was I close?
Yes, but I do believe there's a third category.
Okay, well, let's see how you do on this
What's the
What
third
is the third
category?
category?
Don't share
someone else's word.
What's the third category, girl?
Really?
Yes,
Yeah,
dead ass,
really.
yeah.
I just think you have to try to carve a middle path down, keeping one foot in and one foot out, and seeing things objectively, and maybe occasionally you're protective where necessary, but it's like, but mostly you're clear-eyed and you describe reality, which I think Las Vegans appreciate. We like honesty.
Ish.
I'm going to say it again just for the sake of recording.
Yes.
So the third category is people who kind of are able to stay in the middle and be clear-eyed about both sides.
She said 1 foot in and 1 foot out.
Yeah, where you,
Piss me on the
I
person?
think where you're really committed to describing reality, even though that sometimes might cost you something.
Now, I would say.
Wait,
Oh,
no,
sorry.
I have to repeat
Okay,
that.
go ahead and paraphrase.
Committed to describing reality,
Even though as a writer that may cost you something,
even though as a writer that might cost you something. Thank you.
because that's what we do.
All right, Kim.
Okay, given my three choices, which I think are great. I'm probably I don't have the 1 foot out, 1 foot in that like Amanda does or other writers have, because I know you are between Minnesota and here. Montana. Sorry.
But I mean it as a psychological.
Right, a psychological thing. But I also think that being able to escape and get some perspective is also a nice thing to be able to have. I do feel like I am defensive about Las Vegas, about the people here, and that I'm probably not as in the middle as maybe I would like to be, because I do feel the need to care for the people here. Oh. And maybe that makes me not as, logical an observer or truthful as an observer.
I'm going to agree. I think until I see more of just more of a variety of writing of Las Vegas, because right now there's just so much more of the parachute writing. It's just a one way. So until I see more of that, then I think maybe I would lean, I could have more of a 1 foot in, 1 foot out, but I would like to have more of appreciation of the city before I could have more objective. I don't know.
Yeah, that's okay. That's basically in the middle. When I think I have maybe 2 poems about Vegas. And one was about the process of moving here and dating white men that were not that great. And then finding my spouse that is a white man and is great. And just kind of like the shifts of my understanding of myself, and that feeling like this place kind of sears you into whatever it is that you really are, that Vegas will just burn the BS off of you, and then whatever you are is whatever you are. I don't know, I hold that like to be the truth in my heart about this city. So, but I also think I'm still learning that I don't know every nook and cranny of this town yet. I think there's still places I haven't explored. It's a huge, sprawling valley, and so I'm still curious. I'm still learning. So I would never posit myself to be like, nah, I'm the Vegas representative. I know stuff, even though I've literally held a title. being a representative, I still want to know more. So like, I don't know. We're still dating. I'm still dating Vegas.
Can I just say one little thing?
No.
Oh.
Yes, please.
Okay. So I just want to say this because we're talking about like our view of Vegas and whether it's, and how it is to live here. And a lot of my book is about people who never get to be here and here have their views heard. And I think that Vegas is an exceptionally difficult place for people who are struggling and vulnerable. And I think perhaps that is more extreme than in other places. Yeah. And a lot of my book is about those extremities and the sort of struggles that these folks have that we don't really talk about as sort of middle class sort of folks who are like, writers and, just sort of discussing our like views about everything. So a lot of the vulnerable communities here have a very, very rough time, and there isn't enough housing. There's not enough services. There's all kinds of stuff where people are just sort of dangling out there trying to like get through it.
Well, let me ask you this then, because sometimes things get written about those vulnerable populations in Las Vegas, oftentimes by parachute journalists who go down to the tunnels. That's
But we're going to shout out to MJ Lyle, who's been writing about
MJ
it
Lyle's
properly.
here, yes.
Right. But do you think that there is do you think there's a potential for exploitation or to live up to the cliches of Vegas when writing about even those vulnerable populations?
Yeah, because that whole thing about going to the tunnels and interviewing people, a lot of that is just, I didn't read that particular book, but it's about like a sort of I don't know if it's exploitative, but it could be potentially exploitative in that we're just reading about people who are straight out struggling. And there's something maybe attractive about reading about that. So I wanted to make sure that when I wrote this book, that people really saw people for like fully developed, fully fledged human beings with like joys and sorrows, and or maybe they're like not necessarily nice, you know what I mean, or maybe they're wonderful, but the whole idea is that they're like fully fledged and they're real, and that we get to have a picture of that, and that can happen in any city, any place, any town, and that those people are part of our communities and our world. And so the idea of the book was simply to just like bring that to a sort of, sight line for people. Sorry.
Yeah. Do we want to?
I like the last question. If we want to go to that one, what do you think? Or you want to go to number 5 or number 6?
I'm looking at my boss ladies. That's not a number. Do you want 5 or 6?
That's not a number.
These are our bosses. Give it up for our bosses. Give it up for our boss ladies.
And then typically there'd be like screaming in my headphone right now. It's like, shut the F up, Dayvid, and just rap.
Let's have Vogue ask number 6.
Okay. Bada bing.
And that'll be our last question before we go into Q&A.
All right. Dope. Gracias. Okay. So, wait. 6 says 7 parts. Okay. Yes. There we go. Boom.
They're all good.
They are. Damn it.
We did a lot of prep.
Shh. I'm thinking.
Meanwhile, I'm going to read from my novel.
Okay. Is there a right or wrong way to write about this city? And can I combine these questions?
Yeah, I give you permission.
What's one thing you think has to be in a Las Vegas story?
Ooh.
The weather. It's such a part of us, Like right now, I'm feeling so great because it's beautiful outside. Like it's coldish, but I'd rather take the cold than the 120 degrees sometimes. That's extreme. But yeah, I think the weather is she's a part of Las Vegas.
A character?
Character, yes.
In your forthcoming YA novel set here in Las Vegas, does weather come in?
Not as much because it's during the fall to the spring. So, but actually it does because
It's beautiful.
it's beautiful, and they're teenagers, and it's funny because when it's like August and it's still like even in the hundreds, they wear like the sweatshirts and the hoodies. But when it's actually time when it's warm, then they start wearing like t-shirts all around. So it's funny how it does come into play.
Nice detail.
What about you, Kim?
Just going off on what you said about the weather, just the extremities of living here. Everything is an extreme, and I find it like living in New York in the sense that it's not like living in New York, but there's the extremes of New York and living in this big city. And then there's also similar extremes here. And part of that is the weather. But it just feels like there's a lot of extremes here. And I think you have to write about that if you write about Vegas.
Yeah. I think now listening to y'all, I think grief actually belongs in anything you write about Vegas. If you've lived here long enough to watch something go, I remember the grieving period for the beat, all of us being really, really upset about it being gone, and then feeling lost as a community. Where does our open mic live if we don't have this place? And then the writer's block kind of becoming a different kind of home for some of us.
That's great.
So yeah, I think grief.
Because I was grieving the reading room at Mandalay Bay. That was such a great space. And then it was gone forever. And then Scott and Drew showed up, and it's like, reading room what? You know, right. It's like you can remember. I think my thing that has to be in every story, either explicitly or implied, is juice.
Which juice?
Power. The power that flows through them that gots and them that ain't got.
Yeah.
That is a dynamic that is a recurring theme about this city. Right. Is that, you know, the quest for juice or power or connection, you know, whether it's to get comps or to elevate oneself or to, you know, even get to the point where your legacy matters, that sort of thing. Yeah. And then the contrast with people who are, for lack of a better word, juiceless, you know, without that connection, struggling to get along. I think that is at the core of real Las Vegas stories. So I'm going to go with juice.
That is not what I think about when I think about juice. I love you, Dayvid. Okay. Guess what, y'all? It's your turn. So
we're ending on the sadness of juice?
Yeah, we're ending on sadness of juice. So, yeah, can we?
We're going to open up to about
Actually, I meant Jews.
Q&A. Kim, I'm going to steal your mic, and then you and Veeda will share.
Got it.
Okay, great. So does anyone have a question they'd like to ask?
Okay. So well, first, I'll be one of those annoying people that starts with a comment, but no.
Oh God, here we go.
That's not a question.
No, I just want to say that when I'm talking about like the two types of Vegas writing, I think I'm not talking about, when I'm talking about local or protective writing, I'm not necessarily talking about local journalism, which I think is very good here. I'm talking more about like the PR industrial complex, Chamber of Commerce, ideas about Vegas, kind of entertainment, glitzy lifestyle type writing about Vegas, and which I think is kind of inherently protective of certain ideas about Vegas. And my question is, for Kim and Veeda, is like, how much awareness do you have of that kind of writing about Vegas and the ideas that it perpetuates? And does it affect your work at all? Or does it affect the way people who you know outside of Vegas think about Vegas? You know, it's like the big myth making about Vegas, not the sort of real Vegas that we know.
I remember, you know, camping on Twitter years ago. There was a writing convention here, and I just saw people saying like, and children's book writers were there, and they were on the Strip, and they just like were just you know, really disparaging about it, and like, how can we be here as children's book writers, you know? And so they have this perception that they're, you know, fed from the tourism industry, and it kind of saddened me because like, just not too far away, we do have kids who live here, and we're not just on the Strip, and. Right. And I feel like that is not seen as much. Like there's great, you know, coverage of, yeah, come here and you know, it's entertainment and it's a lot of fun, and so that is positive. But there isn't the positive of just like people who do live here too, and the things that they, you know, they do and they struggle with. So I would like, so if it would be in my writing, I don't think kids ever go to the Strip really. You know, like that's not a part of our, or if they do, it's not like they go on field trips there, or so, you know.
Though they do.
They do. Yeah, like, you know, but there's so many places around Vegas. So it's like it's there. It's like you know, like if someone lived in, is it Anaheim where Disneyland is? You know, like you live in Anaheim, but you don't, and Disneyland you visit and stuff. But it's not like, so I don't know. But I don't think that the things that I write with, portraying to children in Las Vegas, maybe it may not be necessarily what people have in their forefront about it, but I think that's I think that could change.
Isn't the whole idea of Sin City just a lie anyway? Yeah. Like the Strip feels very like you can't have nudity on the Strip. There's no topless things on the Strip. Like you can't smoke marijuana in the casinos. Like it just feels to me like there's like that PR machine that you were talking about is constantly like stitching out these stories about, and I know that depravity happens there, but it doesn't happen because we manufactured it. It happens because tourists behave badly, right? I mean, I don't know. What do you think about this, Figler? Because
Well, I mean, there's this whole concept of locals casino, which is a mind blow as well, right? They're all over the place. I don't know. I think what Amanda made me think of just now in that question is the distinction between stories that are intended to be put out into the world as place making or defining or explaining versus place marketing, which is what really goes out of Las Vegas and attracts so many of the people who write about Las Vegas. Because if you think about the great canon of Vegas work, and shout out to my book club, we try to cover as much written about Las Vegas or from Las Vegas, whatever. It's wildly, all over the place. But a lot of the times we find that, there's these narratives that people want to bring here that really have to deal with the marketing. So you get something like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, which is probably the most famous book about Las Vegas. Some of the more famous articles, come from Didion and Tom Wolfe and just all these great writers who came here. But they just talk about the marketing stuff, or they push back a little bit on the marketing stuff, and it comes into two categories. Oh, look at Vegas, it's as weird and stupid as you think it would be, or hey, look at Vegas, real things happen there, and that's it, and then it just stops. Right. So I think the challenge is to actually write about place like you guys do, but also not worry about those preconceived notions, which is why you're great writers publishing, and we're talking on a podcast.
This was more for Veeda. How do you see the Hawaiian culture reflected back in Las Vegas? How do you think Hawaiian culture has seeped into Las Vegas?
I actually lived in Hawaii for 18 months. And when I was there, I had a friend, and I didn't realize how cool Vegas was to the locals there until I was with her. So she would say she was from Las Vegas, and she was so cool to everyone. So it's interesting. I have this collection coming out at the end of the month, and it's called Shining a Light, 40 Asian Americans That Changed the World. And a lot of these Asian Americans are from Hawaii, and they are lawmakers. Unfortunately, no one is from Las Vegas. I did try to work that in, but it just didn't fit. I was kind of forcing it. But I think about, those who live in Hawaii and the change that they wanted to happen there that has influenced, us worldwide. And I don't know. I was listening to your recent podcast about some of the how do I explain it?
The gambling.
The gambling.
Yeah,
and actually I was so naive. I didn't quite realize until you're explaining all the marketing that goes into Hawaii, and so that actually really bothered me.
Yeah.
So
Boyd Gaming fully decided they were going to just target Hawaii and be like, oh, do you hate your tourists? Come be a tourist in Vegas. And then change the California's food to be Hawaiian food so that they could, serve their customer. But it's disturbing the way that they fully targeted and
But gosh, how protective
glamorizing.
But gosh, how protective
gambling.
this city was when there was proposed legislation that didn't go anywhere in Hawaii to stop Vegas from being able to advertise there. I mean, everyone here freaked out. They went on, this is outrageous. Very interesting.
yeah,
We are maybe too protective sometimes here.
yeah, I guess so.
Last question. Here we go.
Hi.
Hi.
So when I was in college in Los Angeles, an advisor asked me what I planned on doing afterward, and part of my answer was I might move back to Las Vegas and work there. And their response was, "Oh, but you wouldn't want to stay there, would you?" And something you guys talked about earlier kind of reminded me of that, and it was the discussion of how the West, and Las Vegas in particular, sometimes it needs to justify its own sense of place. And I'm wondering, do you think that comes from insecurity? A sense that, that dichotomy between the Strip and everything else, and how people have this narrow idea of it. Do you think that stems from insecurity?
That's a great question.
I think we're the baby. I think that's what it is. That we're a young city. So I think, if you're young, then usually in your youth, you're a little insecure. You're still finding your bearings. I think if people think of it as, okay, we were a desert, it was a wasteland, and then they built up a bunch of casinos and boom, now it's a city. But we've been talking about kind of the growth spurt that's happening, where there's such a large community of people who live here and stay here, go have their kids, take their kids to school here, have 23 chickens here, et cetera. That the city's got to decide, are we going to spend a lot of time marketing and pandering to people from the outside to come in and fuel our economy? Or are we going to spend some time, manage our infrastructure, and take care of the people who live here. And I think, the powers that be got to decide. And I also think the people get a really big say in that. And I think there's been a lot of pushback from the people who live in the city to make it something more than just a place where people can fuck around and find out, to be direct about it.
But that insecurity, that's a theme in a lot of things that I write about. And I'm wondering if we start digging too deep, if we start going for too much truth, if we look for soul searching here in a city where your soul's been maybe sold, are we going to be really scared at what we find? What do you think?
That's a deep question. I mean, what I was thinking when you were talking is that there was an article in one of the Independent, The Current, and it was basically about animosity between Las Vegans and Californians. And
was that a new piece that just came out?
It just came out. Yeah. Oh, was it Desert Companion? That's it. And I haven't read it yet. Who wrote it? Do we know?
Eric.
Yes. Okay, great. Fantastic. Thank you. I haven't read it yet, and I really want to read it because I actually I thought it was fascinating that, I don't know if you did the title or if your editors did the title, but the idea was like this big sister, little sister thing, or this sibling thing. And I just thought that was really fascinating. And I think that's the insecurity that he was talking about, that that sort of sibling rivalry. And if you want to say something about that, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, the idea of the...
Grab that.
Yes.
We get the fuzzy
No
mic.
one's safe from CityCast Las Vegas podcast.
I'll be sending my invoice in a week. The idea of it being a sibling rivalry was there from the beginning because, the idea that like they're the older sibling in some degree and like we might be the younger one. Like the whole essay arose because I went to a McDonald's and they gave me a bag that said, "This McDonald's is proudly locally owned," and it had a picture of California on it, which just made me think like, yeah, everything is just like, we're kind of second fiddle. The idea that like the only reason Las Vegas got so big was because we had the interstate connecting us to Los Angeles and like Salt Lake. But I think, the larger title of the piece, which is Home Means Ellipsis, kind of, arose from the essay itself in that, we are unique. And I think that we need to take pride and joy in that and not try to constantly belittle other people or other states, which I think the whole West dunks on California, but for us, it's very personal for some reason.
It's personal because half of our problems have to do with people coming and going. Like, we complain about traffic, but a portion of our traffic is from who? People who don't live here.
Yeah, so that's why I touched on like politics and housing. I didn't talk about traffic because I knew there was no arguing about that. That's the part. Yeah.
I think that's a great place to wrap up. Thank you so much, Eric. All right, hand it off to Scott.
Thank you guys for coming. Thanks to Kim.
Thank
Well, that's all for today on CityCast Las Vegas. Feel free to go to the website and rate us. What else do we say? And this is what Las Vegas is talking about.
Subscribe to our morning newsletter.
The newsletter is great. Oh my God.
It really is. God, Drake and Cheese is the best.